All right, folks, we're getting real close to time here, so I just wanted to chime in and let you guys know that we're going to start right at 12:30, and hopefully if anybody has any questions, they'll use the Q&A. It's 12:30 now, so let me start. I am Bill Murphy. Your computer says that I am Don Tiemann, and that's not true. I just used his account to log into this Zoom webinar. Welcome to our fourth in a series of webinars we've been doing Wednesdays, and it's been a fantastic way to stay in touch with you, friends. And I'm just excited that we've got so much momentum going because so many of you have not yet returned to your offices, or even if you have, it's a great way for you to stay current with what we've done. Even if some of these solutions are ones that you've seen before, it's good to get updated pictures of projects and to hear some of the things we've learned, because we continue to improve. That's part of that Kaizen training, is that we're always improving. So I'm going to start this presentation. We have it recording now, so any of your friends or peers that couldn't join us, let them know about it. We'll provide a link at the end when we give you the other information that'll come in the next day or two, including a link to the video for this. I'm joined by Ron Gator, and I'll introduce him here in a minute. Ron will be our guest speaker. So let me change that sound. See if I can do that. There we go. And one of the things I want to make sure you understand is that we've gotten a lot more comfortable with Zoom, and a lot of our speakers, this is their first time using it in a live webinar like this. So we're pretty excited as we continue to share knowledge and grow our abilities. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on is trying to stay ahead of technology, and that is to keep things current for you folks. So again, I'm Bill Murphy for ASP Enterprises, Quick Supply Company, and Bowman Construction Supply. Most of you that are already on here already know us very well, and there's a little map there that shows the 8 states that we're actively involved in. We actually have a network that spans the country and the continent, and we have friends from around the globe that are either manufacturers or they do what we do. And it's been really fun growing those relationships over the years. Our company's actually been in business for over 50 years. ASP Enterprises was bought more than 10 years ago by the folks that own Quick Supply Company. And a few years ago, we added Bowman Construction Supply to our fold because all 3 companies have a lot of overlap. We all provide construction materials, and we support the civil design community. We have 8 offices, and you can see those listed there on the screen. A number of our sales team are CPAS certified, and we have 1 civil engineer, PE, that's me, on staff that supports all 3 of those companies and all of our sales staff. And so with all of that, we have this tremendous infrastructure to help you specify with confidence. And we have over 9,000 customers. This slide should be updated. And over the last few years, we've done a great job of linking all 3 of these companies together to share our power. And when I say power, I mean some tremendous warehouses with large inventories. Some of our offices are blessed with some big, impressive showrooms. The one in the top center picture of this slide is actually our ASP KC location down near Swope Park and KC Mo Water Services. It's a beautiful facility. Check it out. I'm sitting in a warehouse at Quick Supply Company in Des Moines, Iowa, where we have a new outdoor display. It's not shown on these pictures, but it's similar to the one on the top right, plus a lot more of our outdoor living products. We have some hardscape specialists in our company. You're familiar with our big trucks that are showing up on sites with a lot of rolled goods and commodities. We also specialize in engineered products and solutions, and we have a fleet of the smaller straight trucks, so we can get to any corner of our markets in a short order with your inventory, and we can be there quick and not hold you up. And we even offer a lot of times advice on site to make sure you're building it and installing it right. Again, tremendous inventory, and we are experts at logistics. I say we, and that's lumping me in, and I'm not one of them, but we have people who are very, very good at moving things around and getting the right product in the right place at the right time. I'm proud of us. I get involved with our engineered products. A lot of our stormwater solutions, but we have even more than that. And we let some of these solutions overlap into different categories. Some of these solutions work for erosion control, but they're also part of our low impact development and green infrastructure package. And that is Mr. Ron Gator. Ron Gator is representing Moats Enterprises, and you know the product as Flexamat, and we're very proud of it. It's done very well for us. I'm going to introduce Ron and then hand the controls over to him. And Ron, as part of that, I'm going to set the remote control. I'm going to give you the controls, but don't flip the screen yet. I'm going to do a little bio. Ron joined Moats in 2016 as a regional manager for the Midwest. He covers all of our states plus more, 13 state territory. and he promotes their permanent vegetated hard armor mats. And he spends his time doing presentations with civil engineers. He works closely with DOTs, and he goes to job sites to provide technical assistance for installs. My job and Ron's jobs are very similar. Ron is the Flexamat expert, whereas I have to know a whole lot of our different solutions. Ron's career in the erosion control industry started with several years with American Excelsior. He gained experience from being involved with the erosion control industry, and he grew a lot in his knowledge of the specification work and how important it is for the designer up front to make sure they have good specs to protect themselves, protect the integrity of their project, and working with contractors on making sure they understand the difference between the different solutions. One of the neat things that he'll get into during, he'll get into it during his presentation about where Flexamat fits in the erosion control industry. Ron is a University of Iowa grad, and as a Cyclone, I don't hold that against him, partly because it wouldn't be good for my health. He went for a full ride scholarship to the University of Iowa, played football for the Hawkeyes. He was named first team All Big Ten his senior year, and then he was drafted into the NFL by a team that I won't mention because I'm a Chiefs fan. I'll let Ron mention it. And Ron, let's make sure you are unmuted. Can you say hello to everybody? And can you take the controls? You're controlling, Ron, but I don't see you as unmuted. Let's see what I can do about that. You look unmuted on my side. Looks like you're running it. And we are not hearing you yet. Let's go to check on you. I hope they can't see what I'm doing on my screen. It looks like you're still muted. Let's try one more time, one more thing. How about that, Ron?
Can you hear me?
I think so. Let's try to turn it up, folks. Can you hear him? Nod yes. Yep, they can hear you.
Okay.
So one of the things I didn't mention, Ron, is they're going to use Q&A throughout this to communicate with us, not
Sure.
chat. So as they use the Q&A, and I'm gonna have to click back to you, Ron, and I'm gonna do from current slide, and I'm gonna give you the controls back. They'll use Q&A, and I'll be able to check those while you're presenting.
Okay.
So try to tap on the screen and then go ahead and take control again, would you? Thanks.
Okay.
You should be able to see the screen move. Let me do one more thing here, Ron.
All right.
And folks, this is on me. This isn't on Ron. I'm trying some tricks with the music, and I think when I was playing music earlier, I messed a few things up because that's what I do. Again, this is Bill Murphy, not Don Tiemann, but every time I mess up, I'm going to say I'm Don Tiemann. There you go, Ron. It's yours. You might have to click in there one more time, and you're driving.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. So I've got a lot of pictures in the presentation, so I'm going to go fairly quick so we can get finished on time. I just believe it's the best way to tell the stories to show the beginning, middle, and end. So what is Flexamat? It's a 5,000 PSI concrete. It's got a high-strength polypropylene geogrid embedded in the concrete with either 1 or 2 erosion control blankets underneath it. You can see the block are 6.5 by 6.5 inches. The height is low profile, 2 1/4 inches with a 1.5 inch gap between the block, which represents a 30% opening for vegetation to grow up through the block. The pyramid shape is what allows us to roll it up into a nice tight roll, and the picture on the bottom is a truckload of Flexamat. We can get 4,800 square feet on a truck, or that's 48,000 pounds. Product weighs 10 pounds per square foot. So we offer 3 different underlayments. The one on the top is Flexamat Standard. It's got Curl X2 underneath it. The one on the far right is Flexamat Plus. It's got Curl X2 in conjunction with Recyclex. And the one on the bottom is we do offer a 10-ounce non-woven. Really the only time that I've used the non-woven is bridge abutment or access road. Anywhere you don't think you're gonna get vegetation, you'll go with the non-woven. 99% of the time, it's either gonna be standard or plus. We do offer a flame resistant grid, and that's all. Okay, so about 4 years ago, we did a job with the city of Lenexa. You can see that's a floodplain area there. And so the reason, the reason they went with the flame resistant grid is because that whole area floods out about 5 times a year. And they wanted to plant a native seed, and that's why I keep going out to this job waiting to see a controlled burn. They haven't done it yet. So you can see that's what it looked like shortly after install. I went back probably, I don't know, six months later. You can see most of the block are filled in. And then I went back a year later, and you can see maybe down at the bottom a few block, but for the most part, that's what you're going to see and get with the product. Is it all vegetated in? You won't even know the concrete block are there. So the hydraulic testing we did at TRI Environmental in South Carolina. That's a 30% slope on a sandy loam soil. What they do is they run water over in the flume for hours and hours and hours, trying to get a ½ inch of soil loss. And you can see the numbers. They both have a plus sign behind them. That's because they couldn't get the product to fail. The shear stress is 24 pounds per square foot. That slide here says 19 feet per second. A couple years ago, the Texas DOT wanted us to test the product on a 20% slope. What that did is it took the velocity from 19 to 30 feet per second. So essentially all we're pointing out is the product can take on a ton of water. And on here, you can see the different shear stresses of TRMs and riprap and either vegetated or unvegetated. You can see by the bar, we're 3, 4, 5 times the value of a lot of these products. But the real key thing to look at is we're unvegetated. So the second you put the product down, it's working. You can see right next to it, the TRM vegetated. So, when I get in front of civil engineers and I give this presentation, I ask them a lot, do you ever specify a TRM in the bottom of a channel? Well, of course you do. The only problem with that is, if it's installed at the wrong time, the contractor may go out there, put it in the bottom of the channel, and doesn't realize in 5 to 7 days there's going to be a 3 or 4 inch rain event. The blanket has not had time to vegetate and grow through it, so it's really unstable, and most likely it'll get wiped out of there. Bill?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so this is the point, the other thing on this slide. If we
I was going to wait and do it at the end. I was going to try to catch you at the end, but yeah, I was going to ask you about the shear stress and the difference between TRMs and ACBs. Where Flexamat fits.
Yeah, so if we had another bar, we would put a articulated concrete block to the right of the Flexamat bar. And really, before Flexamat came along, all you had was a TRM, and then you had to jump all the way to an ACB. And there's a huge price difference between both of those products. So it's really nice that Flexamat fits nicely in between the TRM and the ACB, because the price point is very competitive. It doesn't, with an ACB, you need a spreader bar, a crane. That really adds to the cost of their product. So, and we don't really play in the same field. We're doing outlet pipes and shorelines and channels and slopes, and a lot of their work they're doing, dam emergency spillways, overflow areas that, take on much more shear stress and water velocities than Flexamat.
Excellent point. Thanks, Ron.
So Flexamat is packaged. You can see the top picture. Some rolls have 2 straps, some have 3. It's more for the contractor to understand. It's just important that they strap to each individual strap. If they try to run hook it to the bucket and run it through the straps and back up, the product weighs so much that it'll actually cut the strap in half, and now they can't pick it up and move it around.
And Ron, I clicked on the Q&A, so it may have taken away control. You may need to click in that screen again to keep advancing.
Oh, you're right.
I did that.
No worries. Just trying to get used to this slow. Okay, so, oops, there it goes. So Flexamat, you can see, comes in multiple widths. Standard lengths are 30, 40, 50, but we can customize. The picture in the middle is a 10 by 62. The one on the right is a 16, I believe, by 22. So we don't have to hold anybody to a 30, 40, 50. We can do 22, 35, whatever it is to accommodate the job. Maintenance. So you might be able to tell I'm not a big fan of riprap. This is one of the reasons. They say a picture says 1,000 words. With my product, You don't need to worry about a mower throwing the rocks, weeds growing up through it. If you want to mow over it, you can mow from one side to the other. It's just a much cleaner look than, you know, what you're looking at on the right. Performance life, we say 75 years. We're actually right now just started using a new grid that the UV hours are being increased as we keep testing. But right now, the grid that we have on there now is somewhere around 22 to 23 years. But the whole key to it, the longevity is once the grass grows up through or you get natural sedimentation going over the block, that's why we say the product will last so long. So, you know, trucking, it's gone up. You know, we like to point out if you had a 4,800 square foot area, we would bring in one truck. If you did the same area with 18 inches of riprap, it would require 32 truckloads. So quite a bit of difference there in the freight charges and what we're doing to the economy with all the traffic. We do a lot of access or low water crossing areas. You can see in the picture, there's a channel on the right that comes down and goes across the mat. A lot of DNRs, NRCSs want to be able to drive their pickup from one side to the other. And they can do that with Flexamat. It's kind of hard to do with the riprap. And then on the photo on the right, you can see how it vegetates in, and you got a nice surface there for the trucks to drive over. The product is pretty flexible. It's kind of hard to point out to you without being in a room with you, but there are points in this where when we're coming around a bend, we will have to cut the mat. It's just a contractor using a concrete saw blade to cut the concrete. The only problem with this picture is, as you see in the bottom left-hand corner, we would never leave that area bare. You can see on the other side of the mat, they had installed the sod. They just had not got to the other side yet, but we'd want sod, a blanket, something so water isn't getting underneath that leading edge and trying to reel out underneath the mat. The other point is, let's say these mats are going down the slope. The way you pin the mat down is you use an 18-inch U-shaped rebar anchor. On the width of the mat, the anchor goes every 2 feet, and when two mats abut one another, they go every 3 feet down the longitudinal seam. So we work with a company called Gripple. They make a cross plate anchor for us, and you need, so now it's a little bit different. The cross plate is now coated. In the cable, it's all one system now. You need a drive bar, a gas-powered driver, and a jack jaw. And I used to say the only time you'd use this anchor is maybe if you're at the bottom of the channel like this picture indicates, or like a one-to-one slope to be able to hold the mat down. So what you do is you put the drive bar right in the center of 4 block. You drive it down. Once you get it driven down and leave about a foot of the cable up, that jack jaw, it's got a jaw down at the bottom. You grab a hold of the cable, and when you push down on the anchor a couple times, the duckbill that went in skinny now flattens out, and that's how we get our tension. And then once you got it down and nice and tight, you just take, there's a picture of the jack jaw, the jaws on it. And then once you get it tightened to where you want it to be, you just take cable cutters and cut off the excess. So here's a job that's not at the bottom of a channel or a one-to-one. This is a job I did outside of Chicago 3 years ago. You can see they had no worries about using a lot of riprap above the outlet structure, but I got out there, was just taking some pictures. It's kind of what it looked like beforehand. Then we put in the 2 mats. The only problem, and you know, I'm not trying to be negative. I just like to point things out. So when you're designing, you know, you can do it the right way. And we always, for the most part, do a mat layout and explain to the contractor how to put the mats in. But as you can see on this picture, he actually installed it the wrong way. He put the seam right down, right where the water comes out of the outlet. So the only point of this photo is to show that the guy should have switched mats and reversed them and kind of got that seam off to the side. But on this one, you know, the manufacturer's recommendation is when you put a cross plate anchor in, As you can see in the photo, they go every 3 feet in a diamond pattern. So here's another one, not a one-to-one or the bottom of a channel. This job was just shy of 11,000 square feet. They ended up putting in 1,200 crossplate anchors, which is a lot for a job. This job had the GeoWeb product filled with concrete before. They had a couple failures, so they said, hey, let's give Flexamat a shot. So we put it in about 2 years ago. The only problem I don't like about this install is you can see in the middle of the mat, they had actually poured concrete over the mat. The reason I get it, that's kind of where the problem area is, where the water's coming down and hitting that side slope. But the problem with the concrete is it creates a nice flat surface for the water to run even faster. And now I can't get vegetation to grow up through the mat. We go around trees. I'll show you how we go around that outlet. We do boat ramps. A lot of DOTs like to use riprap off the side of the road for check dams. We take away any concerns. Now you've got a nice, clean, mobile surface. If the car goes off the road, it isn't going to do anything to the mat. And it's a much cleaner look. Here's one. We went all the way down, pretty good stretch going all the way down to the bottom of the hill with Flexamat. You put rock in there, you're going to get, a lot of weeds growing up. It's just, once again, if a car goes off the side of the road, no worries. Here's one we did with ASP. This is, I believe, off of 63 over by Columbia, Missouri. One thing I do want to point out, when they originally did the install, they didn't realize that the road had no curb in there. And so that's why you can see the curb stops there. When they initially put the mat in, the water got underneath the leading edge and it kind of created a problem there. So they had to fix and put the Flexamat in the bottom of the channel and then kind of line it with some grouted riprap. But man, I mean, you just take a look at the bottom of the channel and it's just swamped, huge vegetation of grass growing in there now to slow the water down. Here's a truckload, just showing 12 8x50s that we can get on a flatbed. Here's the proper way to pick up the roll. You can kind of do it that way, reverse go through the bucket or just hook onto each strap individually. So installation, pretty simple. Prepare your subgrade, get your big rocks and chunks of dirt out of there, lay down your seed, and then lay down your mat. So here's the first video. So here you can see we've got a 50,000 pound excavator on a mat with a mat in the air getting ready to knock the mat down the slope. It takes all of about 7 seconds for that install to go in for them. Very, very simple. If you had to grade that out and put down a liner and try to get riprap to hold in there, it would take you a lot longer than what you just looked at. So that's a pretty simple one. Gravity took over. This one's a little more realistic. This one we're going to get a little bit of audio. This is an 8x50. It's on I-69 between 2 roads. And it took this guy all of about 4.5 minutes to unroll. So I'm going to let it go a little bit. I don't know exactly why this guy asked him to pull the mat over. Once I kind of walk around the guy, you'll see all the contractor has to do is put the bucket in between the row of block and just drag the mat over if you want to move it. Never pick it up, you'll tear the grid. It's pretty simple to pull it either sideways or lengthwise when you put the bucket in between the block. So this will go a little bit longer. So here he goes, getting ready to put it in between the block. And then he just gradually pulls it over. So there's all kinds of, you just saw that guy had a bucket on there. Some people will weld a flat steel plate on there. And the reason that's on there is for when they go to dig out at a 45-degree angle on this shoreline, It's just easier to do with that piece of iron on there instead of the bucket or a claw. So we're always going to want on a leading edge or an install like this, it's always going to be trenched in 18 inches. Here's rigging straps, and you know, another piece of equipment that they can use to pick up the rolls with the straps. So here you can see the rigging trains. They got them on the forklifts, and now they're just hooking it on either 2 or 3 straps depending on the width of the roll. Here's those rebar anchors that I talked about. That's what's going to anchor it down. And so on this job, we did about almost 200,000 square feet of shoreline, or I mean slope protection. Down below is the Ohio River. So what we did is, these are a bunch of 16 by 50s going down. You can see where the seam is. Where that seam is where we required them to put the crossplate anchors in. And then on the longitudinal seams is where they are putting the rebar anchors in. Here's a box of what the crossplate anchors look like. So once again, you can see the diamond pattern every 3 feet. You never want to put that cross plate right directly in the seam of the 2 mats. It will do nothing for you. Come on, slide. So one thing I haven't discussed is we offer a 2.5 foot wide by 90 foot roll of Recyclex. That is used whenever 2 mats abut one another. So the only purpose of that blanket is to keep the seam from reeling out and to also keep the seat in place. So what they would do is they would roll that mat down, peel it back, roll out the blanket, and now when they get ready to roll the next one right next to it, it's all covered up and we're good to go. So here we've got American Excelsior's Erosion Control Lab. Back in 2010, they had 40 ton of rock in that bottom of the channel. They tore it out. They normally don't let the vegetation get quite that tall, but they just wanted to be able to show everybody that, you know, the product, you can mow over it. And I'm not sure if I have to click this, Bill. Video.
That's not a video that I had loaded separately, Ron.
Yep, that's all right. And so here it is, 71 days later, you got vegetation growing through the whole thing. It's locked in, it's going nowhere. And then I happened to be out there a couple years ago. Oh, whoa.
Yeah, I had closed the Q&A. You'll have to click on the screen one more time and take it back. It does that. It overrides for some reason. You're doing great. It's 1 o'clock and you're doing great.
Oh, okay. So there it is. Like 7 years after the install, all nicely vegetated. You don't even know the blocker there, doing exactly what we want it to do, and it looks a lot better than the riprap. So I'm going to try to go through this really quick. I'm going to just show you a bunch of different ways to use the product. Channel design, trenching the leading edge, 18 inches. If you have more than 1 mat going, roll out the first one, peel it back, dig out 3 inches, lay your next mat, and all we're doing is a shingle effect. So here's a channel 750 feet long, 1.5 to 1 side slopes. We put 16 by 30s in the bottom and 16 by 22s on the side slope. The only thing I didn't understand is why they didn't dewater the bottom of the channel. Come on. Okay, so we started there, down at that end where the 2 outlet pipes are. You can see between the pipes, we can't get into every nook and cranny. I'll show you how we fix that. After I took this picture, the guy put his bucket on the roll there, the mat, and pulled it around as far as he could so that we could cut it and then line up the next mat. And then here they are going down, really sloppy install with all that water in there. Moving along. Just, it was my first install, and then bam, 2 days later, job is installed. One thing I like to point out on this, you can do this one of 2 ways. If you look at the top of the slope on the right, you can see they started the mat 4 or 5 feet past the top of the slope, or as you can see on the other side of the slope, they trench it in. So if you don't have 4 to 5 feet to run past the top of the slope, trench it in and you'll be set. And then what did we do with the areas where we couldn't get the mat in between the pipe and where we cut it? We just put concrete over it. And there's another view of it. So here's one. We put 16 by 50s in the bottom and 5.5 by 50s above it. The only thing here is there was about 8 foot on the bottom and 4 foot going up the side slopes with the 16-foot mat. If you look, you got to really look, but the contractor, I wish he would have kind of pulled the mat out a little bit better to get them spaced out. But even though he didn't, as you can see by this photo, we still had a really good amount of vegetation coming through the block. Here's one in Lawrence. We did this one about 3 years ago. You can see all the blanket above the Flexamat. And then here it is. I went back, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later.
Ron, this picture looks so much different than the project before. The one before was really well vegetated. What happened, do you think, on that left slope?
Correct. So what I want to say about the install, this is a perfect example. I try not to throw contractors under the bus because, you know, I want to work with them, but you can obviously see on this job where they did a really great job seeding 60 to 70% of it. And then that whole side slope where you have nothing growing in, it just appears to me like they didn't seed at all. So, and unfortunately I've gone back to this job and they have gotten some pretty major reels going down that side now. Inlet outlet. So, you know, we do a lot of outlets. You can see what happens when you use riprap. It'll start scouring out from the edge. We tore that out, put in Flexamat. Now you got a nice, clean, mobile surface. So for an existing outlet, where the concrete structure is, we're going to put an 18-inch trench in there. The leading edge goes in. To the right of that, you'll see on the detail where we want a lip of concrete going there. So when the water first meets the mat, there's no way for water to get underneath it. And then at the very tail end, the last roll that you put down, we also want to transition the bottom mat in as well. If you have a new outlet, very simple, just roll out the mat and set your new structure on top of it and keep on going down the channel. We have a guideline table, so depending on the pipe diameter, you know, you can see a 48-inch pipe, we're gonna go 16 foot wide. Our minimum length is 20 feet. If you wanna specify and do 60 feet, thank you, I appreciate that. Here's a job here in Ankeny. Geez, Bill, I think this was done probably 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, I believe so.
You can see quite a few, you know, 5 outlets there coming down. And by the time I got out there, it was starting to look pretty good. I just got to tell a funny story. If you look at the left of this slide, you'll see that there's no vegetation there. When I was out there, the homeowner came out and was asking me what I was doing. And I told her, and I was like, hey, what happened to that slope side of the mat? And she's like, well, we've got a neighbor about 4 doors down that wants us to maintain and mow this. And if we don't, then he calls the city every 30 minutes. So why not just throw some Roundup on there? Okay, so here's an outlet. You can see we've got our lip of concrete. They actually went above the structure with a little piece of it, and then on down the slope with the rest of it. So once again, if they wanted this vegetated, no big deal. They can mow right over it. Here's one where you can see a ADS pipe, you know, nice tight fit underneath it. There's no way we're going to get erosion or any concerns of anything washing out underneath that pipe. This is a DOT job down south. I like it. You've got an outlet at the top and then an inlet down at the bottom. The other thing I like is where the contractor kind of had tore away some of the grass and the vegetation that was there. He did a great job of putting a blanket in there so that we can protect that leading edge. Here, there's your 18-inch trench. And then there's, you can kind of see there's a little bit of concrete lip there. So here's the outlet. Roll the mat over it, and then just take a concrete saw blade and cut it out. Plunge pool, man, we did this probably 5 or 6 years ago. We do a lot with the city of Omaha. You can see what it looked like as they were grading it out. Here they've got steel sheet piling down on the bottom there at that end. You can see that it's Flexamat Plus because of the amount of water that's going to come over it. I got these pictures from ASP because I had not started, so it was good for me to see where the mat started, because when I got out there, all I saw that it would look like that and was underwater. So you can see they've got a few strips above the structure. The rest of it's going down. So there it is, looks really good coming in. So I've got a bunch of kind of before and afters. Now you can't even see the mat at all. So just different angles. There you can see when I first got out there. And then, you know, probably 4 or 5 months later, had a little bit of vegetation, and then went out there probably another 3 or 4 months later, and it was really looking good.
That's what we like to see. It's fully vegetated. You can barely see the Flexamat unless you walk right up on top of it. So that if there's ever a major flood and the top of the vegetation goes away, the root system and the stems are always protected by the Flexamat.
So there's the bottom end of it. And there it is coming in nicely. And then once again, as you'll probably already know, it's going to be fully vegetated. Really nice job we have there. Slope design, we talked about trenching in the leading edge. You can see on the detail where the 2.5 foot wide blanket goes at the seam. So here's a job years ago with ASP over in Gretna, protecting the slope. You can see normally we do a shingle effect like one mat after another in a channel, but as you can see, you can actually do it on a slope as well if need be, just so we don't get any water getting in at the seam.
Hey, Ron,
yeah.
We had one Q&A come in about, it was quite a bit earlier in your presentation, and he was asking if you ever use Flexamat on a TRM. So he might have missed what the different options are for the backing material below the Flexamat. If you could talk to him about, he asked specifically about using Flexamat over a TRM on a slope. Thanks.
Yeah. So most of the time, we're going to use Flexamat standard, just the Curl X2 on a slope, because normally the sheet flow coming off of the top of the slope isn't that much. I've had times maybe on like this photo right here where you've got the creek bed down at the bottom, you would use Flexamat Plus. A lot of the time the Plus is just used at the bottom of the channel, or pretty much anywhere where you're going to get a lot of water flow going over it. Here's a job we did a couple years ago. That's the HOA president's home. That was a really steep slope. They ended up putting steel sheet piling down at the bottom. And then I think by the time I got out there, we were starting to get some vegetation. You can see they put concrete down at the bottom to hold it in. That's one of my projects this year, Bill, is to get out there and get a nice drone shot of that all vegetated in.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Here's a Nebraska DOT. So they didn't want to go all the way to the top of the slope. So if you want to start in the middle, feel free, trench it in. You can see they've got like a silk sock kind of there at the leading edge, protecting it. And here's one major emergency repair. You can see what was happening. The water was coming down, really knocking out the inlet. This job was interesting. Because we make so many different widths and lengths, the product being heavy, this guy, he only had equipment that could pick up so many pounds. So we did 3 8x40s so he could manage it. We also, you can see how we did some slope variation to where we could level it off. This is one of my only jobs that we put in what are those called, Bill?
Ajax.
Ajax, yep. So they put the Ajax in there as a kind of an energy dissipator. The only thing on this one I wish we would have done is put a mat on a little bit wider. I've actually been out on the job site when it rains, and that the Ajax actually forces the water out, not so much through it. They had one inlet in the beginning. They have 3 up there now. You can't see the third one because of the way I took the picture. They did a good job, you know, putting the concrete like splash pad there. So when it goes out, it hits that Ajax first. They got concrete or coconut blanket on the sides. And then I think this is a video, Bill, but it's fine. So here's that job I showed you earlier with the cross plates. There's the Ohio River. They had a lot to grade out. This thing we did back a couple years ago in November. One thing I like to point out about this job is I went back to the engineer and said, you know, I'm not complaining that you used the Flexamat by any means, but why did you use the Flexamat? And he said, well, you can thank the DNR. They wanted something that was hard armored, but also environmentally friendly. And deer can walk over Flexamat, but they can't walk over riprap. Shoreline, this is one of our details. A lot of the ones that I deal with are a lot actually flatter than that. You can see we're going sideways. This one, they put in knowing that, you know, they're not even close to the, I mean, it's at the low water mark. When that thing fills up, it should hit the mat right in about the middle of it. But like on this job where you see it, our recommendation normally is an 8-foot wide mat, 4 foot in the bottom in the water and 4 foot above. If you're having any issues with muskrats, it really helps deter them from trying to burrow in. This is probably one of my favorite jobs. Benson Park, went out there, looked at it. You can see if you look down at the first tree, we actually went around the tree. So that's what it looked like kind of in the dormant. I went out, it was starting to come through. And then I went out, I think a year later, and I was just amazed. So that tree, they actually saved that tree before they put in the Flexamat. The roots were exposed. All they did was put some dirt, put the Flexamat over it. You can see it starts to vegetate in, and then you go back a year later, and man, I tell you, just unbelievable job. So real quick, I took, you can see on this photo what happens when you stop using the Flexamat, what the shoreline looks like. And so I went from the other side to show you, you know, all that great vegetation on the Flexamat, but not so much where it's still continuing to erode away. Adams Park, this is another beauty. They actually, I mean, look at the before and after. You know, that was 5-6 years ago. That was probably, I think I took that last year. Just phenomenal. This was one where the engineer had asked if we could cut the grid, which normally we would say no to, but you know, this water flow is pretty mild. So what they wanted to do is plant some plugs in there. And so they did, and there they are starting to spout up. And then that's what it looks like years later. It's just probably, I mean, when you think about an 1.5 inch gap between the block and you're getting that kind of vegetation, it's just unbelievable. Riverbanks, kind of the same theory behind a slope. What they did here is put some gabions on the bottom at the toe. So all you're going to do is run the mat down and then just tuck it in behind the gabion. Here's one where they beveled in a couple of the leading edge blocks. They put an erosion control blanket up in there. This job, they wanted to use crossplate anchors and also live stake willows. Trees will grow through the product. On this one, you can see if you look at some of the crossplate anchors, you'll see the legs are bent up. The contractor can actually pull and keep pulling on that cable too much and bend it up, and we don't want that to happen. And then there it is, vegetating in. Here's one, people's backyard. You can see there's a big outlet down there. You know, all we're trying to do is protect their yard from washing away. Here's one where I know this is down in the southeast. They always like to line the leading edge with sod. At the bottom, I'm not a huge fan of rock, but I get it. Sometimes you got to put it down there to protect the toe. And then here you got the tree growing through the mat. Pond overflows. So this is a job that I hope to see very soon. This is up in Ankeny. I happened to be out there when they first started putting some of the rolls down. You can see between the two retention ponds, it's just an emergency spillway. And then this is like 2 years ago. I've been by there probably 4 months ago, and it looks a lot better than that. And here they did another area where they've got a couple outlet structures. I can never say, what is that, Arbor Labor, or what's that road?
Or labor.
Or Labor. I despise that name. So Yeah, here it is. Okay, that's done with that. Here's one emergency spillway with the lake. They put steel sheet piling there, trench it in, put some concrete down. And then at the end of the mat, they also transition that down. This is another job with the DNR in Indiana where they wanted to, instead of grade seed mat and let the grass grow up through it, they wanted mat down and well, do a soil infill on top of the mat. And there it is, like a year later, looks great. I think, Bill, they left that like 8 by 30 section just as kind of a marker so that they understand that below where you can see the Flexamat, that's where all of it is at, just so they know.
Interesting.
So they don't like dig it up. Clear Creek Levy, this is about 150,000 square foot job. It's this levee is in between Omaha and Lincoln. Did this with ASP, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago. These are the only photos we could really get on the project because they now it's fenced in and you can't really get in there to get a good look at it. DOTs. Let's see here. Okay. Missouri DOT, this is our first job with MoDOT. This is down by Jeff City. I've yet to go by this, Bill, because this was before I started, but I'd like to see what it looks like. The picture on the right, as you can see, it probably would have been best if they would have put some blanket up there. The water's pretty dirty just because of it's reeling out the soils above it. But I'll tell you what, if you can get vegetation like that in 45 days, I'll take it. Man, that's really going to slow the water down, and it looks a lot better than a bunch of rocks sitting down in the bottom of that channel. Here, there's a MoDOT. This is their maintenance crew. This is my shout out to Todd Noble in Kansas City. Thankful he was there, was out at the job. They literally wanted to leave the channel looking just like that. And Todd's like, well, you may want to smooth it out and, kind of shape it up, because the Flexamat is not just going to go on a bunch of crumbly looking dirt. And because he was out there, it actually turned out to be a very nice job. Very nice vegetation growing in there. Here's one, well, you can see how concrete does in channels. So this MoDOT job is I-270 in Page, Maryland Heights, west of St. Louis. Did this with the St. Louis guys. They actually left all that concrete in there. And then by the time I got out there, they were crushing the rest of it, which they actually left on site, put dirt over it. And now you can see they're going down, putting the mat in. And then here I went out about a year later. You can see they told me they put a 10-ounce non-woven in the bottom and Flexamat Plus on the side. When I took this picture, it did not rain, so I don't know where the water's coming from. But anyway, you can see I go out there, there's nothing growing in the bottom, but on the sides, and I keep going out there, and all of a sudden, 7 months later, I went out there and I thought I was on the wrong job. Just phenomenal growth in the bottom of that channel. And here's a picture I got from one of the business owners that I said, wow, that's a lot of water. And he's like, no, that was just about halfway through the storm. By the time the storm got done, the water was actually up on the parking lot. So that's just a real testament to the product. You've got 8 to 10 foot of water going over the mat. And with that vegetation, it's locked in, it's going nowhere. You see this a lot with the curb cuts. They always like to run riprap down the slopes. I just think it looks better if you could use Flexamat and get something that's going to vegetate in and give you a nice green look. Here's a MoDOT job. There's on I-63 again, underneath the bridge. One of the main reasons they wanted to use Flexamat, you see that walking bike path? They did not want riprap underneath there with the chance of the rock falling off and hitting someone down on the path. That is the main reason why we got this job. Just safety. So just showing it vegetate in, landfills. We do a lot of letdown structures. Here, seeing it start to grow in. Here's a job that I did on one a couple years ago. people ask, does the product fail? Well, it can. And like on this design, you can see the Flexamat is going down the letdown, but then they ran a TRM to the side. And hindsight's 2020. I wish they would have ran the Flexamat off the side, because now when that water hit the mat, all it did was cut a pretty bad reel down the side of the mat, as you can see in my drone photo. So I went back and gave recommendations to the landfill that where it levels off there, they really needed to put Flexamat in there to stop that from happening.
Hey, Ron, I'm not looking at counts on the slide number, but it's 120 and you're rolling great. You're doing great. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm trying.
No, you're doing great.
So here you can see, this is what they should have done. Kind of put those fingers off with the Flexamat. Here we do boat ramps, a lot of DNRs. Here's a boat ramp where the homeowner actually filled it in with fines to take away the bumpiness. Here's an access road. You know, we're doing more and more of these with these wind farms. So this does have the non-woven fabric underneath it because we do not want vegetation to grow through it. But what I want to point out on this one is, if you look at the seams, that is not rebar anchors. Whenever you're doing a drivable surface or maybe a flat shoreline, we sell a 20-inch stainless steel zip tie that you can just zip the two mats together that way, and it saves the job a lot of money. Access roads, product can handle 70, 80,000 pounds driving over it. Here, a gravel infill where residential, they laid it down, filled it in with gravel. The next one is, you'll see they did a soil infill, laid the mat down and just put soil and seed on top of it. I think this next one, this is my favorite soil fill job. Down in Tampa, they ended up putting Flexamat on the side slopes and in the bottom. The contractor went out there and blew dirt in between the block. And then they came back and ended up putting sod over it. And then I'm going to tell you what a phenomenal looking job. I think my counterpart just took this picture to show everybody that he actually visited the cheesecake factory. Down in Texas, we've got a manufacturing site. You know, these big wide channels, you just really need vegetation in there to slow the water down. Here's a Air Force base I did with ASP. They got a guy that lives over in Wichita. It was my first job with the Army Corps of Engineers. A lot of these jobs, the contractors never even used the product. This guy put it in, did a great job with the install. Got it nice and tucked into the sides. They got concrete coming out from the structures where the leading edge is. And I went back, I believe that was last year, and I was just, I could not believe the amount of growth we had in the bottom of that. Here's the other side of the road. It was a little bit smaller. There you can see. And then you're really, in the next photo, you're really able to see where the Flexamat stops, and then there's really not much vegetation after it. So we offer a project checklist. We decided to do this about 7, 8 years ago. We realized a lot of the excavating companies have never heard of it, let alone installed it. So we put this together. The big point is the third one down. If they just go to our website, flexamat.com, click on the YouTube, we've got a lot more videos on there on how to install it. You know, 3 or 4 more points down, you know, do they have their seed and fertilizer? You know, this is a product, it's not a do-over, right? It's not a straw blanket. You can't lay the mat down and be like, oh, darn it, I forgot the seed, because you're not going to be able to get the mat back up. So it's always good. They got this checklist, make sure they've got their anchoring, their blanket if they've got, you know, 2 mats going side by side.
And that's one of the places we add value. Just to chime in, I know we're about 124.
Yep.
We like to add value as your distributor is doing pre-con meetings with the contractors, and we even like to be on site making sure it's getting installed right. So
definitely,
that's the place we can add value.
Definitely. And then I always tell civil engineers, if you're, you know, if it's not a private job and you're working on public stuff, I know it's virtually impossible to use the word Flexamat. So this is our generic term for the product: tied concrete block, mat, or equal. I see that spec in a lot of different jobs, just because you have to have an equivalent offered. CAD details, if you go to our website, they're on there. Every once in a while, when I'm with the ASP or quick supply guys, I've got little zip drives that they can hand out, and it's got the CAD details on there as well. And then Bill, ASP Quick Supply, thank you so much for putting this on today and allowing me to speak to the group today on the product. So thank you.
You did awesome, Ron. And I got to tell you, the only mistakes that were made today were mine, not yours. And I bragged early on about being good at Zoom, but I had you muted and I didn't realize it. And then I also, every time it wasn't working for you with the controls, it's because I was messing around and you're running my computer. And as the host, it gives me override power. So I was overriding you. So I'm sorry.
No worries.
This is one of the things that in person people could see that Ron and I have worked together a lot over the years. And I dig working with him because he's a consummate professional at getting done on time, but also fitting more material into an hour than most people. He can do 200 slides in an hour. And for these webinars, I've been limiting our speakers to 70 slides. That's how much I trust you, Ron, and believe in you.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and click the next slide here, and I'll read a question to you. But first, I want to say that on your screen, for those who joined late, it says Don Tiemann, but I'm not Don Tiemann. He's my boss. He couldn't be with us today, but I used his account to log in. Don is helping me. When this is done, he sends out a Survey Monkey, and that asks you some questions. For those of you that already registered and got on this webinar, it'll feel redundant for the first three. We're going to ask your name, your email address, and the city you're in. That's for us to know who we hand that to in our company to see that you participated and be ready to respond to you. The other two things are very important. We no longer require you to answer the 5 technical questions to get your PDH certificate. We just simply ask you, do you have a project you need help with right now? And even if you don't, do you have feedback for us? That's the 5th thing on the Survey Monkey. What feedback do you have on this webinar? Ron and I both like to learn from people and always get better, but also what kind of things are you interested in? The Q&A that was used, we will answer those in writing. I answered some during, and then I also noticed Ron answered some through the presentation. When this is over, Ron and I are going to both go through the written Q&As. I'll send those to him, and we'll type out answers for those. So when Don sends out your PDH certificate, even if you don't need the PDH certificate, open that email and look at that Q&A because it'll have the written questions and our written answers. The other thing is the Survey Monkey. For those of you that did not ask a question in the Q&A, the Survey Monkey is a chance for you to ask questions, and we will do a good job of following up with you. It'll be either me or somebody from ASP, Quick Supply, or Bowman, or it'll be Ron himself. So thank you for joining us. It means a lot to us. We know your time's valuable. We've got another webinar next Wednesday, May 13th. That'll be a couple of our own in-house guys covering geotextiles. And then we got a couple more coming after that. So it's 1:28. Ron, there's one question I think I could go ahead and ask you.
Okay.
I took over control of the slides. And the guy's asking, do you install the Gabion first when you have a combination project with Gabions and Flexamat, or do you install Flexamat first?
Yes, sir. I think you could really probably do it either way. I think that one that I had in the presentation, they had actually put the Gabion down at the toe just because of the water flow and whatnot. And then it was probably just easier for them to back in the Flexamat behind the Gabion.
Okay. And what I like about that question is it points to the importance of having you involved, your company and us. The sooner we get involved with a project, the more help we can be. Ron, I noticed you're really good at going out to projects and you can see things they did well, but you're also very good at seeing things they could have done differently or better. And you've been on jobs where you had to try to fix something during or after the fact, but wouldn't you agree the sooner they get us involved in the design and the layout up front, the more you can help them?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, that's awesome. And folks, I want you to know Ron is remote. He's not sitting in his office like he normally is. He's at a job site actually adding value and helping somebody. And he took time out of his day at a job site to go get in his truck and to be on here presenting for us. And Ron, you couldn't tell. If I wouldn't have told him just now, it sounds like you're in your office. So great job out of you.
Right on.
I appreciate you, man. Good job. So everybody, thank you with that. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And Ron, thanks, and safe travels. And everybody be safe out there and be hope-filled. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, bye-bye.